Hi there, in this video we're going to take a deep dive into catering pricing and more specifically how to price your jobs as a freelance private chef. It comes up time and time again. There are hundreds of opinions about how best to go about this, and for lots of chefs it's one of the most confusing challenges they face. So the following few minutes we're going to break it all down and look at the two main formats for catering pricing. Which one you should choose. It does actually vary between job types, so I think you'll be quite surprised when we analyse the numbers as to what the results are. Now, I'm a massive fan of efficiency in my kitchen, and I quite often say I hate doing jobs twice, which is why I love a clever spreadsheet that can do all of those repetitive, time-consuming jobs automatically. You only have to set it up once and you're good to go. Okay, now it's incredible how many chefs kind of screw up the food cost calculation chore, throw it in the too hard basket. Okay, it's a bit of a shame when Excel can just do it all for you. And if your spreadsheet skills aren't so sharp, don't panic. I've linked a copy of our spreadsheet, okay, the one I've set up for my students to use, the same tool for calculating food costs that I'll be looking at in a minute. To demonstrate how you could be leaving a ton of money on the table if you don't make the effort to start calculating food cost properly. Okay, at the very least you can also get ChatGPT to do it, and we'll take a look at that option too. Now, this is actually a monster of a topic, but I'm going to break it down into small digestible chunks, and I'll timestamp each section so you can quickly jump back into the relevant point next time you're stuck costing a job that involves catering pricing. But anyway, let's get into it. The two most common formats for catering pricing as a private chef are either to charge a flat rate for your service per day plus the cost of food and any other expenses on top, or to work with set menus and dishes where you work out the menu cost for those dishes and then set the price per head for the job as required. Either scenario, the main goal is to make the pricing simple, transparent for the client, and ultimately for it to seem like good value for money. Everyone needs to be happy, and you want to be invited back for another job because it went as expected, and you also want to do the job again because everything went as you expected it to. Seems pretty simple, but most chefs usually wrestle with which to choose. And the reason for that is that neither is really the perfect approach for every job, so sticking to one format can sometimes mean either missing out on potential profit or the client thinks your food pricing is through the roof. Okay, so we need to take an approach that kind of uses the most suitable method for the current job that you're pricing. Now, as a side note, there are some circumstances where one will obviously be better than the other, and this could be dictated by the legal requirements of the country you operate in, or your status as a limited company versus a sole trader. For example, you might be set up as a sole trader in France and need to keep your turnover as low as possible to keep your tax bill down, or to stop you from hitting the VAT threshold and then being required to charge and pay VAT. In this case, you're better off charging for your time and letting the client pay the bill for the food separately. But there are other scenarios. It would often be better to build in the associated expenses like food costs, drinks, additional staff into one nice tidy invoice for the client. So before we go any further, it really is worth considering your own structure as a business and if there's anything that will force you to use one model over the other. Now, before we make a comparison about when to use each model, we need to understand how food cost calculation actually works, okay, and how to calculate food cost percentage. Now, this is an incredibly boring job, right? Nobody ever wants to sit down for a few hours and work out how much each ingredient they're going to use for each dish and how much it will cost and add it all up. But if we don't do this vital step in running our business, you run the risk of working our bollocks off all day and taking home less than an underpaid restaurant chef because we drained all of that money that should have been profit on food for the job. Okay, so we need to build ourselves a system for making sure that we have a handle on how much each dish costs. Now, this is one of the biggest benefits of the price per head model, as you can build yourself an evolving repertoire of dishes and perfect them. The ones that you offer your clients, cost them once so you know the value of them and never really have to work it out again, especially if your spreadsheet has a list of prices that you can update from time to time, and that'll update the cost of the dish's price. So it usually works like this in restaurants, but as a private chef, we can use a similar model. Any decent restaurant chef should be making a cost calculation periodically. Okay, it's usually monthly, to keep a handle on how the kitchen's performing, and that's done by taking the total figure that was spent on food for the period and dividing it by the total sales from the same period from the restaurant till system, and then times that figure by 100 and you get what's known as the food cost percentage. Now, to get an accurate figure for how much money was spent on food during that period, the chef should do a stock take at the start of each period. The food cost calculation equals the stock take figure from the start of the period, known as the opening stock, plus the total figure from the incoming food invoices, okay, how much food you bought, minus the stock take figure from the end of the month, or the closing stock. Okay, that's how much you spent on food for the month. The opposite figure to your food cost is gross profit, okay, commonly referred to as the kitchen's GP or the GPs. A profitable restaurant will be aiming for a food cost of 20 to 30%, meaning a gross profit or GP of 70 to 80%. So the theory is that if you have a food cost calculation for a dish, often referred to as the plate cost, let's say it's €5 and you times it or mark it up by 4, you sell the dish for €20, and if all goes to plan, in theory, at the end of the month, you should have a food cost of 25%. And this is standard operating procedure in restaurants, but we can apply this cost calculation principle to our menu price per head model. For private chef roles, I don't usually bother with stock taking things, as we're not trying to keep a handle on a whole restaurant full of staff that can all kind of massively impact the profit margins. A freelancing business is much easier, much simpler to keep a handle on, so it's not worth wasting time on stock taking. Now, obviously, prices vary a lot from one supplier to another. There are sometimes discounts on products. Things like fish and vegetables can kind of fluctuate daily, etc. But we're trying to find a reasonably accurate figure and then add in a small buffer so that we can be confident that we aren't going to be left out of pocket. Okay, we're looking for the most accurate ballpark figure that we can get. Okay, so how to find food cost of a dish. As you might imagine, costing a dish is simply a case of making a list of the ingredients you're going to use with quantities and then looking up the cost of those products from the supplier or the supermarket, wherever you're buying it from, and then dividing it by how much you're using. This is so much easier if you keep all of your recipes in grams and milliliters, okay, for ingredients that are sold by weight and volume. So, for example, let's say I'm using 550 grams of flour from a kilo bag of flour. A kilo bag of flour costs $2.50. It's simply 250 divided by 1,000 to work out the cost per gram, then times 550 grams that we're using, and that comes to €1.38. Now, if I was using cup measurements, this becomes a nightmare because 550 grams of flour is 2.29 cups, or as it's often written, 2 cups and 4.5 tablespoons of flour. Okay, don't even get me started on pounds and ounces. Okay, so keep track of everything you do in the kitchen using metric volume and weight. This is the way forward, and it makes cooking the recipes also a lot faster as well. Now, writing this all out is boring. It takes ages, and it's really easy to see why people don't bother with food cost calculations. But if you keep a list of the prices you're using, and all of your recipes in a spreadsheet, you can cost the recipe out in seconds and play around with it a bit with the numbers when we're costing out jobs. Now, I strongly urge all of my students to either use the spreadsheet that we're going to look at in a minute, or build their own, or use some kind of online app to keep track of your recipes and your costings from the start of your career. Okay, build that repertoire. There's nothing worse than having all of your recipes written down in a black book, a diary, and then leaving it in a supermarket trolley when you're shopping, and it's never seen again. It's heartbreaking, it really is. Okay, now, one last option for those who are still really putting off getting started with a robust system for food cost calculation is a simple hack that I've been playing around with recently, okay? And that is asking ChatGPT to do the work for you, okay? Now, I have to say, it was pretty accurate. I tried 6 or 7 different AI tools to to make sure the figures were accurate, and the figures are a bit staggered, but the ChatGPT result was pretty close to the numbers in my own spreadsheet. So as long as you leave a little margin for error in your costings, this isn't the worst way you could cost your dishes. Okay, certainly better than doing nothing at all. So as you can see, I've copied the list of ingredients for my example 3-course menu into a ChatGPT prompt, asked it to cost it using Waitrose in the UK, as that's where I might be shopping. Okay, and you can see it's broken it all down perfectly, just as I've asked it to. And it says the overall cost is $94.50, and because it's for 10 people, that's $9.45 per head for the menu. Okay, now my own figures from my own sheet works the same meal out to be $81.26 or $8.10 per head. So given that my prices are from a wholesaler here in France and not a supermarket, and it's quite a complicated 3-course meal with nearly 60 ingredients, I think it's done a pretty good job. I also went on to ask ChatGPT things like, now base the prices on Walmart in the USA, will now use prices from my cash and carry here in Belzere, and it came back with figures that were pretty close, or close enough in my opinion, to be using. So let's look at how to use a spreadsheet for calculating food cost and maximising your catering pricing. So here's my spreadsheet, the one I use to manage my recipes. When you're finished watching this video, you can download a free copy of this example sheet. It's loaded with all of our recipes, all the ones from our cookbook. It's over 200 recipes, so that you can have a play around with this sheet. Remember, the goal is to get yourself organized with some kind of system. Okay, there's loads of apps and online menu planner tools out there, but I've kind of yet to find one that ticks all of the boxes. Some do one thing and not the other, some do another thing but not this one. So for me, still the most customizable and flexible is to use a spreadsheet. So this sheet will manage the following tasks. It will store your recipes so you can find them quickly and scale them quickly. Scale the recipes to the number of people that you're cooking for. Create a menu plan from your recipes for up to 2 weeks, and then give you the menu cost and the suggested price for the menu. It's going to allow you to assess the figures based on the 2 charging models that we've been talking about in this video, and it's going to generate a shopping list for your menu plan, which is another job that's pretty boring. It's about as boring as costing the menu in the first place. Okay, so let's go through that one step at a time. The recipe information tab is where I enter new recipes. It's as simple as scrolling down to the last row of data and entering a new recipe here. In column A, I'm going to type the name of the new dish. Column B, how many people this recipe serves. Then in column C, I'm going to choose an ingredient. I should be presented with the options as I type, as it's more important to select one from this list so the Excel formulas will work correctly. Once I've entered that ingredient, the unit will automatically appear in column E, and I just need to add in the amount and then move on to the next ingredient. Now, once I've entered all of my ingredients, I'm going to copy the dish name and how many it serves information down to cover each row, so each row has the same data. I'll click on one of the cells in column J, usually the top one for the recipe, and I can type my method here. And that's it. I'll never have to add this information again or add this information up again. Now let's jump over to the prep list tab. Okay, this is where I'm going to plan my job. Whether it's a 2-week menu for a client or simply a dinner party like this example, all I need to do is list out the dishes I'm going to cook in the first column. Just start typing one of the words in the dish name, and you'll be presented with that list again. How many people you're serving on the relevant day. So in my example, I've got the same 3-course menu we asked ChatGPT to cost earlier, and it's for 10 people. Okay, and that's it for this example. Just you could go on and fill in the rest of the grid for the whole 2 weeks menu if you had one, but for now that's it. Now over on the right hand side, I've got the total cost for each dish and the total menu cost at the top, and this is the figure I'm going to take over to the costing breakdown in a minute. I can toggle on the yes no cell at the top of each day if I want to include or exclude any part of the menu plan, any day from the menu plan, from both the costing or the shopping list. And this is really useful for longer jobs. If you don't want to buy all the fresh goods at the start of the job, you can play around with the filters and, for example, make a shopping list for the dry goods for the whole 2 weeks, and then make 2 separate shopping lists for the veg, one for each week, for example. Now, one small side note, when you're clearing this form, you won't be able to highlight the whole page and clear the contents because the page is protected to preserve some of the hidden formulas. You'll need to highlight each column like this and clear the contents out one at a time. Now, once the menu plan is set, I can jump over into the order form tab, and it'll write me a shopping list. Okay, it will have been compiled automatically. I can click the filter button here and remove the rows that have a 0. And that will just show the ingredients that I need. Now, I can also filter by type in the far column. This is really useful for splitting up your lists. So I can choose dry goods, I'll leave the frozen in there as well, and the dairy, and make a list for the whole 2 weeks. Okay, that shopping list can then be copied and pasted, put somewhere else, or I can print it out. Then I can filter it by meat, fish and vegetables and go over to the menu plan page and turn off the second week. Okay, copy or print that list and then make another one for the second week of the job. So I can really quickly organize the job without having to sit for hours and make lists every time I'm planning a job. All you have to do is enter those recipes into the sheet once, and that's it. Now, this sheet uses prices from my suppliers here in France, and if you're using the same suppliers regularly, you might want to click this little plus button and go through the list and change the prices and the packet sizes here, or at least for the most expensive items like meat and fish. There is a few lines at the bottom for you to add more ingredients in, but the existing products are locked for editing, as changing them will stop the existing recipes from working correctly. Over on the recipe printout tab, I can search for a recipe by starting to type in the first cell, and it will suggest a list of recipes as I type. Select the one I'm looking for, and the information will follow. If I want to scale the recipe, change the number in the yellow cell, and the information will update. And you can obviously print this out if you need to. Now, this is where the fun starts. Let's jump over into our charging breakdown tab and look at the 2 costing models. First, you need to fill in the information in the yellow cells. So I know that from the menu plan that the total menu cost was $81.26, and that's for 10 guests. Mark up as the number of times we're going to multiply your menu cost to get the sale price. I've chosen to mark my menus up by 4, and Excel has told me that I need to make the sale price $32.50. So for now, I'll just go along with that figure, and I'll set my menu price for the same price. For this example, I'm going to say that my day rate's €300 a day if I'm charging with the day rate plus food cost model. And because it's only a 3-course dinner party, it's only going to take me 1 day. Now, with all that information entered, let's look at the implications of the 2 different models. Now, what you're going to find is that the model that works best in terms of more profit for you and how much value for your services it seems for the client, it comes down to how many people you're feeding. So let's say the dinner party was for 2 people. The price per head model would mean I'd only make around $50 for the dinner, whereas the day rate plus food cost model will always leave me with the day rate of $300. However, the day rate model also means that the menu cost for the client is $158 per person, which doesn't seem very good value at all. Job costs with low numbers are often quite difficult to make seem good value for money, and the client will need to understand that they are requesting quite a bespoke service which comes at a higher price tag. If they aren't willing to pay that, it might be worth considering not taking the job. If you scan your eye down column D, you'll find that the balance point for where the profit for both models is similar in this example, okay, and that's somewhere between 12 and 13 guests. Probably the point where it's as profitable for you to charge with either model. And if we carry on down the list, adding more guests to the job, you can see that with the charge per head model, the cost per head obviously stays the same. Profit is going to go up with each guest. At some point, you'll get to a number where you can't do it by yourself, okay, and you'll need to employ an extra pair of hands. and that pair of hands will obviously be paid for out of the profit because you're charging per head. But let's say you can cook for up to 20 people by yourself. That would bring you in 187 more than if you charged with the day rate model. Using that model, all that happens as you add more seats to the dinner table, it's more work for you and it's a cheaper cost per head for the client. Now let's go back and look at the sale price for our menu. We took our food cost, marked it up by 4, but depending on the occasion or the location of the job, that might seem a little bit low, and you might feel that you can charge a little bit more per head. Now, whichever model you're using, people are always going to break it down, the quote down, in their minds to a cost per head and compare it with what they would pay in a restaurant. So if the going rate for a fairly intricate 3-course meal is more in the range of about 45, then go with that. If we change that in our calculator, we can see that absolutely nothing changes to our profit if we're charging a day rate. But the profit from a dinner for 20 people using the cost per head model is a whopping 737 euros. So simply by choosing the wrong model, could have left over 400 euros sitting on the table. Now let's look at the impact of changing the menu. Let's say the client comes back to you and says that your price is too expensive and you need to make it cheaper. You can suggest that you can prepare a menu with a lower menu cost. So let's go over to the prep list tab and change a scallop starter to a courgette and mint soup with ricotta, and the passion fruit dessert to a chocolate mousse with raspberry gel and chocolate soil. Our food cost calculation for 10 people has dropped substantially to 51.06, and we only need to charge 20.42 per head, assuming we've marked the menu up by 4. Now we can go and propose a new menu to the client and bring the price down by 10 euros from the original 32.50 to 22.50 per head, and this should be very well received. Now when it comes to our profit, even though we've brought the price down by 10 euros per head, we're still making 350 for the job. It's not the 487 it would have been with the more expensive menu, but we're able to please the client by cutting their costs, and still makes the job worthwhile doing, okay? Worthwhile taking on. In most cases, there's always a way to keep the client happy and maximize the potential profit of the job if you have the figures to hand to play around with. Now, one final point that's definitely worth mentioning is that if you're agreeing a price per head, you should politely confirm the minimum number at the time of booking, okay? Especially with bigger numbers, because it can all start off looking good, but it's more likely that there'll be no shows from the group due to sickness or other issues than having extra people dumped on you last minute. Okay, obviously more guests fed means more money, but it's pretty annoying to turn up with too much food and not get paid because 6 people were no shows and the job, okay, and you're massively out of pocket. This happens a lot with bigger jobs like weddings. You know, people are like, there's this many coming, and then loads of people drop out. Okay? But so make sure you have a polite but transparent terms with your client before booking the job. So in conclusion, you can and should use a mix of these two models in your private chef business. Use the cost per head model when you're costing out jobs that are one-off meals like dinner parties or functions, weddings, things like this. Jobs that are longer than a couple of days, longer than a weekend. For jobs with roughly more than 10 people. Okay, and remember with these jobs, it's important to agree on a minimum number of guests that the client is willing to pay for. Or jobs that you don't need to worry about keeping your turnover below certain thresholds. And it's better to use the day rate plus expenses for planning jobs that are longer than a weekend, and there's a varying number of guests on any given day. There are less than about 10 clients, and the price per head model isn't profitable enough to cover your time. If you need to keep the turnover as low as possible, and you can hand the food receipts directly to the client separately from your own invoice. Okay, so with all that considered, most importantly, you need to make sure you're paying attention to your figures and use a system that means that you aren't running around doing loads of jobs and actually not earning enough from them. Okay, so I hope this was useful. If you've got any questions about the method, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll come back to you as soon as possible. If you want to download a copy of the same sheet that I used in this example, then the link is there as well. Thanks for watching. See you soon.